Well, hello there. It's Ary Rosenbaum with another fun-filled episode of that 401k podcast. Dan Venturi is not here this week. Let's just say we're both busy. Dan had a business travel, dealing with a TPA client. I, of course, was a little bit busy with my daughter's bat mitzvah, which thankfully is now over with. I will say that when you're planning these monthly that 401k conferences and the that 401k national conference in Disney World, you realize that the most stressful event that you can plan is a bat mitzvah, or bar bat mitzvah. I don't want to sound sexist. Either one is very stressful, dealing with all the different providers, photographers, caterers, this, and that. And I think besides the fact that you have to deal with a teenager who's obviously the honoree, you actually have to deal with the guests. And I'll tell you this much: when you have RSVPs for that 401k conference, it runs a lot smoother than the invited guests to any of your important events in life. And I always say that the best way to weed out people in your life is to throw a bar bat mitzvah or a wedding, because a lot of people just flake out. But that's a whole nother point. That's my Larry David Curb Your Enthusiasm moment for this episode. But speaking of events, now that by the time you hear this, we will probably be at MetLife Stadium with Sean Landetta, so we can turn and talk about our event in Arlington, Texas on December 13th, AT&T Stadium. Guests, hopefully by the time this drops, you'll know that who the guest is. Going to have a great tour. They're going to take a picture of us at the 50-yard line. Obviously, the largest venue that we've been at. It's going to be a great event. $100 gets you in as an advisor. Get 4 hours of content, lunch, meet and greet with a Cowboys great, and of course the AT&T Stadium tour. And of course in March we will be at Walt Disney World for that 401k National Conference. March 10th to 11th, 2020, Walt Disney World Swan. Heck of an event. Planning a lot of different new things. And of course, there's an early bird special that's going to expire on December 31st if you want to join us in Orlando. And speaking of 2020, St. Louis is booked for May the 8th. Of course, busy this week with everything else, but also looking at different venues. Pricing is quite honestly, pricing is a very big consideration for these events. That's why we did Foxborough instead of Fenway Park. That's why some of the cities that I've looked at, aren't going to happen just because the costs are just that much more. So we have some new cities that we're thinking about. So as the months go by, the closer we get to 2020, then our schedule will fill out. Speaking of venues that, I wanted to go to New Orleans, but Superdome is going to be renovated. So no Superdome for a while. So let's get to today's episode. Today's episode is kind of tales of an ERISA attorney. I recently did a webinar for a rollover, IRA rollover company. And the owner of the company liked my stories, and he said, by the way, you should write a book. And I said, funny you should say that. I've written 2 books. I've written 2 books that nobody's read. Well, a handful of people have read. Actually, it was really funny. I've done 2 books. One is called 401k'd, and the other one is called The Greatest 401k Sequel Book Ever Written, something like that. It's both on Amazon, both available on Kindle. The second book is you could actually pay for a printed copy, and it was kind of funny being in Cleveland at Progressive Field in September for that 401k conference. And there was an advisor who actually brought me a book and wanted me to autograph it. And of course, anybody who wants me to autograph something and take a picture, I remember years ago at FI 360, somebody wanted to take a picture of me. And I'm like, why would you want that? It's, I collect autographs. I go with my son to card shows and, meeting Mike Scott or Dwight Gooden or, some other guys. There'll be a show in November Thanksgiving, where Don Mattingly, I'll be able to meet Don Mattingly for the first time. These are the people I want to see. I don't want autographs from ERISA attorneys. I don't want any autographs from any 401k plan providers. It's not something, there are a lot of great advisors out there. Listen, I love J.D. Carlson. I think he's fantastic. I love what they do with the Retireaholics. They will be at that 401k National Conference. I don't want J.D. Carlson's autograph. I don't want, a lot of the other guys. Mike Webb, who listens to this podcast, a good friend of mine, and probably one of my greatest supporters, especially on this podcast. I hate to say it to him. I don't want his autograph. It's not insulting. It's just you want autographs of celebrities, famous people. I think anybody in this retirement plan space, not so famous. But anyway, let's get back to Tales of an ERISA Attorney. And one of my favorite stories, of course, is people ask, oh, why'd you become an ERISA attorney? Well, my answer is the truth. It's the first job I got. I went to law school at American University. Job prospects in those times were pretty bad, even worse today. Our rankings in law school, when I was there for law school, they always said, oh, when we build a new building, we'll be in the top 50 law school. And of course, my second year of law school, we moved into the new building. And for a short time, they were in the top 50. And then the rankings, the bottom fell out. And they actually are, I think as of now, still ranked behind schools that I wouldn't even apply to back in the day because they weren't very good. Or they weren't as good as American University. And there's one law school ranked higher than American University that didn't exist at the time I went to law school, which was the University of Nevada at Las Vegas School of Law. So anyway, to be an ERISA attorney, that was the first job I got. I got a tax LLM degree from Boston University. Still had a tough time getting a job. Took the California bar the summer after I graduated with a tax LLM, and still couldn't find work. Then I found an ad for a third-party administration firm in Syosset looking for an ERISA attorney, and I applied. I always wanted to be a tax attorney, not necessarily an ERISA attorney. I did take coursework. There was a qualified plan course at Boston University. It was taught by somebody who later became Marshall Wagner's partner. I think he's still a partner today. No, Tom Clark did not teach me ERISA. One of our other partners did. I don't know if he'd want to admit it, so I won't mention his name. So anyway, I took the coursework, got the position at this administration firm for the high salary of $35,000 plus benefits. There was health insurance involved. It was funny that summer before I got the job at this company called Mobius Tech, which is this TPA that I'll talk about, I actually interviewed for a landlord-tenant job. And I remember that job was $29,000, and there's no health insurance. And luckily, that wasn't something that I had any interest in. And I worked at the firm for a week, and then I just said, you know what, this isn't for me. Let me become an ERISA attorney at Mobius Tech. I actually was working for Berman, Sussman, and Forsetter, which was the attorneys, the owners of Mobius Tech. Some of the owners of Mobius Tech had an affiliated law firm, so they could build under the law firm. So while I did work at Mobius CBiz, as it later became, I technically was an employee of Berman, Sussman, and Forsetter. And of course, as talking about the BU Law coursework and qualified and non-qualified plans, whatever's in the book, textbooks, the ERISA outline book that Sal Shapati writes. These are books based on the idea. Well, not so much Sal's. Sal's book is also how-to fix problems. But when you go to law school and you have a case book, or talk about the rules of retirement plans, it's all about how plans should operate. And when you work for a third-party administration firm, you realize more often than not, there are problems with these plans, and there's sometimes there are such problems in the plans that there is no self-correction or any rules on how to fix a problem. You just have to wing it. Um, and so I was at Mobius Tech for over 4 years, and it was an interesting place. There was a guy. One of my favorite stories is a guy by the name of Orville. He was Jamaican, and the reason I'm going to say he's Jamaican is not because to point out that he was Jamaican, but to point out the fact that when I started work there, that was 1998. He had a cubicle near my office, and he liked to sing the Celine Dion song from Titanic. What's that song? My Heart Will Go On or something. And hearing this guy try to sing, I mean, I'd rather hear Lassie bark than have Orville sing Celine Dion. But he still did that. Orville was one of the office workers who, helped around the office with the copies and all that kind of stuff. And then one day they decided to make him a computer expert. And Orville wasn't very good at computers, and it showed. So Orville then became someone in charge of distributions. He would help process the distributions of plan participants, terminated plan participants. And one day, Orville, instead of paying the woman out $18,000, wanted to pay the woman out $31,000 from a 401k plan. And of course, the problem is she only had an $18,000 account balance. And so my friend, who was kind of the person in charge of the administration department, actually had to call my boss, Harvey, with permission to fire Orville. And the point is that A, there was lack of training of employees, but more importantly, B, it showed me that some employees are more equal than others in terms of level of protection. That somehow Orville could get screwed up. Orville could screw up, and you still actually had to ask the boss for permission to fire him. When somebody like me, I think if I made a similar kind of mistake, I'd be given the heave ho, as they say. So anyway, as an ERISA attorney working over there, I worked hand in hand with a lot of the plan administrators. And one of the biggest problems, being an ERISA attorney working for third-party administration firms, which is the two first jobs I had, is the fact that you have to put out a lot of fires. And the problem is the fires are created more often than not by your employees. I'll never forget in was it 99 or 2000, going to an administrator, and he's asking about what's eligible for hardship distributions. And he's telling me, looking at I think the Mobius plan, or, the plan for the company, whatever. And he's like, you know what? Can't you take out, what could you take out? Can't you take hardship earnings? And I'm like, no. He's like, well, I always allow hardship earnings to be, I'm sorry, earnings from 401k deferrals. I always allow that. And I said, buddy, since 1988, they don't allow earnings on deferrals to be eligible for hardship distribution. So, this is what I had to deal with. There was just really a lack of training employees. They hired a lot of people from my college, from Stony Brook, start them out and just, not give them any proper training. And the problem with that is when you don't give people the training that they need, over time they never get better. They just stay the same. They never become good employees. They never become competent plan administrators or competent compliance people. They never learn. They just never catch up. And, I've had experiences where you're working with an administrator with 15, 20 years experience, and because they never had the proper training, they weren't very good. And, the place, the Mobius Tech CBiz was kind of run like summer camp. There were times, when they would hire people. I'll never forget one time they hired somebody to be an administrator, and for some reason, I don't think her computer was ready, and, she couldn't operate the computer and start administering plans. So this is her first day. They give her a bunch of plain documents to copy. And she was told to, go to the copy room and make these copies. And lo and behold, she was so upset and so offended, she actually quit that day. So, it's just to me a kind of amazing thing where you interview for a job, you start work there, and that day you decide to just quit. I don't understand it. But anyway, she got so offended that she was asked to copy plain documents. She quit then and there. And then I remember there was one other guy, I forgot his name. Anyway, he wasn't very good at what he was doing. He was a plan administrator, and he just got my friend John, who was supervising him. Uh, you know, wasn't a big fan. I think the axe was going to fall on the guy. So anyway, he calls up John at 2 o'clock in the morning and leaves a message. And he says, "John, I guess you're not here. I'm going to quit." And my buddy John's like, "Yeah, I'm normally here at 2 a.m. in the morning." So anyway, this is kind of the silliness that you had to deal with. So Mobius, they eventually sold out to CBiz. So I started there in '98. I think by '99, about maybe less than a year in, they sold out to CBiz. And I remember Dan Sussman, who was, one of the owners of Mobius, along with Harvey, telling everybody not to worry. And I remember telling my father that day, when somebody tells me not to worry, it's time to worry. So anyway, Mobius was a money loser. They put in, Mobius was the merger of two companies, IBEX and DCP. I think that was the other administration company. So IBEX and DCP merged to become Mobius. The company was constantly losing money. There were too many chiefs for a tribe, as they say. Too many cooks for the kitchen. In English, there were just too many owners. Not enough revenue to support that many owners, and it was a failure. And the problem with buying out a company is, in this circumstance, when CBiz bought Mobius, they had an earn-out agreement, and so those owners who had run Mobius down into the ground were hired by CBiz to run CBiz Retirement Services Inc. So you still have this ineffective leadership, and that's the problem with any type of organization. Culture can only change if it's changed at the top or by the top. So as badly as Mobius was run, the CBiz was the same, and eventually, there was a downtime in the business in 2001, 2002, and I'll never forget. There was one day where we kind of knew that 6 or 7 employees out of 60 were going to get clipped, and I'm going over the list of who in my mind is going to get clipped, and none of the incompetent employees that I suggested get fired did get fired, which always shows to tell you that when you look at certain companies, they don't value the real valuable employees. They just pick and choose who they like. So it's when you're a favorite of the boss, no matter how good or not good you are, you're protected. So anyway, I think it was a Thursday. It goes down on Valentine's Day, so we always used to call it the Valentine's Day Massacre. So a bunch of people got clipped on Thursday, and on Friday they gave us pizza for the survivors. So it's kind of like the Glenn Ross scene with Alec Baldwin. If you win a first prize is I think a Cadillac, second prize is a set of steak knives, third prize is you're fired. So this was kind of like, well, you're either fired or you get pizza. So what was funny about that was a lot of people were upset and they didn't eat the pizza, and of course I ate the pizza, and I said, you know what, I'm going to eat the pizza. It's not baked with the blood of the employees that got let go. But anyway, that sometimes that goes to show you about protesting. The bosses. In the end, they really don't care. So about a year or so later, I said to Harvey, "Whose dumb idea was this?" And Harvey's like, "Well, it was my idea." I think that's really shows a lack of empathy, shows a lack of understanding when you do fire these employees. The next day you give out pizza to the people that survive. It's wrong. So anyway, CBiz decides to get out of the daily 401k plan business. They sell their businesses. They sell their block of business of CBiz Retirement Services Inc. to BICIS, which of course now is the census. I move on to another TPA. And again, you got the same issues with the lack of training. Uh, and that's where I saw, people of 15, 20 years experience, not knowing and understanding what to do. And I remember one time, this is going back in 2007, and the administrator is telling me that he's still running his matching provision for a certain plan on a 7-year graded schedule, and I'm saying, you know what, buddy, we got rid of the 7-year graded vesting schedule in 2002. You shouldn't be administering it that way because the law changed, and your 7-year graded schedule had to get knocked down to a 6-year schedule. But you're putting out a lot of fires that your employees create. You're dealing with a lot of administrators who just don't know what you're doing, and so a good chunk of the plan is good chunk of the time is fixing problems. And some of the funniest parts are when you're dealing with plan provider where people don't get training, whether it's the financial people that we had working because we were producing TPA, or the administrators. If they didn't have a basic understanding of retirement plans, it got to some really funny results. And so here are my 3 favorite questions. They always say there's no such thing as dumb questions, but yes, there are. Number 3 on my list is where administrator comes up to me talking about one of their biggest our biggest clients, and says, "Oh, we talked about the alien exclusion, the non-resident alien exclusion, which means that if a non-resident alien receives no U.S. source income, you can exclude them, and it won't affect the participation rate of the plan under 410B." And so the administrator's learning about this, which is something they should have known about. But anyway, the administrator says, well, this client has, people around the world. And what about Puerto Rico? And I said to the guy, I said, you do realize that Puerto Rico is not a foreign country. It's a U.S. Commonwealth. And while they do have their own tax code, they do get paid in dollars. And then the administrator says to me, Puerto Rican dollars? I said, no, American dollars. He thought not only was Puerto Rico a foreign country, he also thought that Puerto Rico also had its own currency. This guy was a college graduate. And what's scarier was he was a college graduate, my alma mater, Stony Brook. So that tells you a lot. The number 2 dumbest thing I ever heard. And she's also responsible for the number 1 dumbest question I ever got. Anyway, they since we were producing TPA for our clients, they would send out these fiduciary advisors, and they were licensed, and they would help, and they would go over, meet the clients, go over the plan terms and all that stuff. And one day, this one woman who worked for us calls up and says, "Oh, I'm looking at their plan highlights, and I see that the plan offers an age 60 in-service distribution." So she asks, "What's the difference between an age 60 in-service distribution and age 59 and a half in-service distribution?" And I told her the truth. The difference is 6 months. And speaking of the dumbest question I ever got, well, it wasn't really with me, but the same fiduciary advisor, we brought her on our sales meeting to set up a MEP, a potential MEP for these independent gas stations. When I say MEP, if you don't know anything about 401k plans, I don't know why you're listening, but a MEP is a multiple employer plan. So we meet this potential client, this independent gas station association, and we bring her along, our fiduciary advisor, and she's talking to somebody who is associated with the association, and to strike up a conversation, the person she was talking to said to her, "Where are you from?" So our fiduciary advisor says, "I'm from Yonkers." So the guy from the association says, Did you know that Yonkers is the second biggest city in New York? And our fiduciary advisor, who did graduate from Binghamton, which is a far better school than Stony Brook, asked, "What's the biggest?" She didn't know what the biggest city in New York was. Well, folks, it's New York City. But again, this is the absurdity. I used to always call it the fear of the absurd. This is, it was like a strange place to work. And, so after, 4 years of that, you know, I moved on to working for a couple of law firms. One law firm was a union client. Union law firm with just dealing with union plans, and I was there for about 10 months. Good people, just not my cup of tea. I was from the single employer world, and I was working for this really great ERISA attorney. But the problem with working with her was she liked to do everything at the last minute. She'd go around and meet clients and not have to sit at the office till late hours of the night. She's working on plan amendments at 3 a.m. in the morning. And, there's no reason why an ERISA attorney like me should be working at 3 a.m. in the morning, especially with 2 infants at home. Needless to say, I had to leave after 10 months, and I joined another law firm, where I was given the opportunity to build a national, ERISA law practice, or thought I could build one. And unfortunately, when you surrounded by people who don't know anything about business or marketing and such, it's a problem. And I really thought I could make a go of it, because at this new law firm, they had a situation where attorneys, partners of the firm, would get an origination fee. So when they got a client on board, they get 50 cents of the dollar of any legal fees brought into the firm, including areas of the law that weren't connected to them. So if we had an existing corporate client, the corporate attorney could get 50 cents on the dollar of any money booked, or billed by me, and still I couldn't get any of the partners of the firm to go ahead and share with me their client lists or introduce me to their clients. And so that was a problem, and that really led me towards marketing and writing articles, which I continue to this day on JD Supra or on that401ksite.com. So let's talk about some of the crazy stories in conclusion that I've had to deal with, working as an ERISA attorney over the years. Of course, the Matt Hutchinson situation, which I talked about in a previous episode. That was a lot of fun. If you think fun is almost ruining your career. But luckily, I just knew where it was heading and, dealt with it accordingly. And so Matt Hutchinson, I think, probably has another 8 or 9 years in jail. I knew the guy's advantage benefits, Jeff Ritchie. He's accused of stealing, I think, a lot more money than Matt Hutchinson. 316 plan administrator, TPA, stealing money for clients. I always think that when a plan fiduciary or a plan provider steals or tries to steal plan assets, they have better chance putting a pantyhose in their head and robbing a bank. Because when you're a fiduciary, it has fingerprints, in a sense that it's a paper trail, and you're easily caught. And I think if you're a TPA or plan fiduciary like Matt Hutchinson, eventually they will find out that you've stolen. Of course, other crazy things, stealing of, talking about stealing, we had the plan administrator at one of the TPAs that I was working at, almost got away with stealing $30,000 from one of our clients' participants, and the only reason he got caught was because the administrator incorrectly put down his own IRA account number. So his Fidelity rollover account number he got wrong, and that's how he got caught. Our guy in charge over there of the TPA didn't want to call the police or press charges because he didn't want to have anyone know that there were no checks and balances to make sure that somebody, could get away with something like this. Um, I've had, weird questions over the years. You have the beneficiary killing a participant. What do you do with that? Um, Another favorite crazy story is a time when we had a client that was based here on Long Island. They made, they were a food company, and one of the fiduciary advisors says, "Oh, Ari, what happens if people try to defer using a fake Social Security number? These people are illegal aliens, and they want to defer money, but they have fake Social Security numbers." And I said, "Mike, that's a crime. Um, and not only is that a crime, people who are undocumented work, I guess today is undocumented workers, really don't have that kind of money to defer and save for retirement. They usually want to send money home, or they have jobs where they just really can't afford to defer. So I just don't think that that's likely to happen. But this is what happens. And then, of course, I think my last but not least, the crazy story is, again, I always talk about the story where I had a client being audited by the Department of Labor over their defined benefit plan because they excluded one of their former employees by name. That employee went to complain. And, of course, in the interim, the Bernie Madoff thing happened. And this plan had $3 million of their defined benefit plan assets in, all in with Bernie Madoff. And, of course, they didn't have a ERISA bond either. And like I was saying about taking that class at BU, or even Sal Tripati's book, I don't think they really talk about what happens when a defined benefit plan puts in all their assets with one, investment, and that investment goes to poof because the guy in charge of the investment, was running a Ponzi scheme. I assure you, that's not in a book. Luckily, I worked with a very nice DOL agent who gave me a lot of leeway in terms of developing a plan on how to fix the problem. It dealt with, trying to rely on the trustee of the Madoff case to get some money back for the client, as well as, the fact that the plan was not under PBGC and we could easily waive the benefit of the owners of the medical practice. But again, these are stories and these are problems and issues that, there's no easy answer. And of course, the textbooks and the outline books and all that stuff, they aren't there. So anyway, that's it for this week. But like I said, go to thatfor1ksite.com for more information about that for1k conference and that for1k national conference. Next week, we should be having Dan with us, and hopefully a special guest. So until next time, talk to you later. Take care.